Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. I was watching a video by one of these dysfunctional Afro-American Negro females where she was talking about how black women need to divest from the Afro-American Negro community. And as I watched this video talking about how black women needed to take their economic resources out of the black community, I just had to shake my head because this whole argument about divesting from the black community is completely illogical, and anyone who understands economics can deconstruct this whole idea of divestment and see how absolutely ridiculous it is. Now, these Afro-American Negro women, they say they want to divest from the black community because many of these black men are not productive. In their eyes, many of these black men are trifling, many of these black men are incompetent, and many of these black men just don't want to get their stuff together. However, their whole argument of divesting is completely illogical because in order to divest resources means you actually have to control resources, and you have to control resources outright. Now, when I take a look at many of these Afro-American Negro women, many of these Afro-American Negro women primarily have jobs, and they have their jobs and they get their money primarily from white corporations, government jobs, or government programs like your welfare, your WIC, your Section 8, or even these college grants, and they even buy their homes in these government home buyer programs. So when it comes down to your Afro-American Negro female, she does not control any sort of economic resources. When it comes down to your Negro female, she does not control economic resources outright. So she cannot divest resources if she does not control resources. Only a business owner, only an institution can divest resources because one, they own those economic resources, and two, they control those economic resources. So a business owner can divest from a community by closing its stores in that area and leaving that community, or a business owner can divest from a community by selling their property to another owner, and that owner can go out here and do what they please with that resource because they control resources, so they can divest resources. So the whole argument of divesting falls completely apart when you understand the concept of economics and you understand the distribution of resources. Moreover, we listen to these black women talking about divesting, and it's completely ridiculous when you see who they get their resources from. Now, when it comes down to the black woman, she was only given control over the black economy by white liberals who created the welfare state because they wanted to keep a consumer controlling the economy. And this is something your black female doesn't understand. She has only been given that power because white liberals saw her as the way to easily make money at the black community's expense, because as a consumer, she is spending more than she's taking in. Moreover, she's not investing anything in the community. So 97% of her dollars go out of the black community, and the other 2% of dollars go into the pocket of that black pastor, and 1% of those dollars goes to her other consumer goods and services, and most of the money does not stay in the black community. So how can you divest resources when the economic system is designed to pretty much take your resources that are given to you and then give them right back to whites who control supermarkets in your area, Arabs who control your grocery stores, Koreans who control your hair and nail salons, and many of these jeans and sneaker stores or other businesses which are not controlled by you, or these fast food restaurants which are controlled by Indians and that black pastor. So again, almost 99% of black dollars go out of the black community. So the whole argument of divestment, again, completely illogical when you understand economics and you understand economic systems, because an economic system is the way a nation allocates its resources. And the way resources are allocated in the black community, it's socially designed so those resources do not wind up being used towards any sort of building. So this black woman sitting there talking about divesting from a black community, that makes absolutely no sense if you understand economic systems. Because again, in order for somebody to divest resources, they have to own resources. Black women do not own any sort of resources in their communities. They are given resources by white men, and they are given their jobs, they are given their welfare, they are given their Section 8, they are given their food stamps. These resources are allocated to them by white men. They are allocated to them by white liberals in the government, and they are allocated to be used for consumption. So you're sitting there talking about divesting resources that you do not own, and you cannot divest anything if you do not own anything. So I'm listening to them talk about, no good trifling black men and divesting resources from no good trifling black men. But you cannot, again, divest something you own to get back at black men who you call no good and trifling. And the whole no good and trifling black man argument is another fallacy when you really think about it, because many of the no good black men that many of these black women want to divest from, these black women raised those black boys into these dysfunctional black men. So you divesting from the black community to get away from the no good black men to go create another community elsewhere is going to lead to the problem reoccurring once more in another 20 to 30 years. Because as David Carroll has said, Blackistan comes from the black woman, because when it comes down to the black woman, she is the one who is teaching this dysfunctional culture to her sons and creating many of these no good black men who terrorize their communities and are completely irresponsible and incapable of taking care of a home or taking care of a family or building anything of substance. Because it's her joining that feminist movement back in the 1960s, which led to much of the decline of the black community and the creation of the welfare state, which led to the black community being in the sad state of affairs that it's in. So her sitting there and saying we need to divest from the black community when it was your investment in the feminist movement and this white liberals welfare state that led to the state of affairs that it's in. So you cannot divest from a community you created and a situation you created. And with the mindset and dysfunctional thinking that many of these Afro-American Negro women have, what they're going to do is, if they leave this community and go someplace else, is create another Blackistan someplace else. And we have examples of that happening all over the country as white liberals have decided to call themselves diversifying many suburban neighborhoods like those in Memphis and many parts of other parts of the country, where they decided to let many poor urban people come into these predominantly white areas, and those white areas were soon quickly turned into ghettos. And I remember watching a video where Dan Freeman talked about how parts of Memphis, where Graceland was a once prominent, nice area, was turned into a literal ghetto overnight by allowing black women to come in under the guise of diversity and improving the quality of life of the area. The area soon declined because as those women came in and brought their dysfunctional culture in, it led to the neighborhood turning into a literal ghetto. So the whole argument of divestment is a completely ridiculous one once you deconstruct it And once you take the parts of it apart, because again, you cannot leave Blackistan, because Blackistan is not a place physically, it is a mental place in the mind of the Afro-American Negro woman. And because it's a place in her mind, she then teaches the culture of Blackistan to her children, and that culture is what turns many neighborhoods into ghettos. And wherever she goes, whether it be a fancy suburban neighborhood or Buckingham Palace, wherever this Afro-American Negro woman goes, that area is going to turn into Blackistan because of the way she thinks, the values she has, and the culture she teaches to her children from generation to generation. Now, this whole divestment argument, again, is completely illogical, because when you take a look at divestment, that means you have actual control over resources. And when it comes down to the welfare state and affirmative action, black women have no control over any sort of economic resources and cannot allocate economic resources in any way, shape, or form. Now, the people who could have divested before the feminist movement were those black business owners, because those black business owners controlled and owned resources, and they had the power to actually do something like divest, because that's because they had money. And if you want to talk about divestment, I'm going to give you an example of divestment. Now, when many of these schools were busing black children into white areas, the white people in places like Boston protested it, and when they saw they couldn't win in court, they went and packed up their bags and moved out of those areas in Boston. Now, when they took their economic resources out of those public schools and out of those communities, that was divestment. And people can divest when they own and control resources, like those white people did in Boston when they bust black kids into those public schools. That's divestment, because those people owned property in those areas, those people paid taxes in those areas, and because they owned property and paid taxes, they could then sell their property, leave that area, and then turn it into the urban blight that's going on in many of those areas right now. Because when you own resources, you can control resources. And when you control resources, you can buy and sell resources. How many black women own property in black communities? How many black women own businesses in black communities? How many black women own economic assets in black communities? Because if you can answer that question, you can divest from a community. Then you can leave a community, because then you have economic assets and you have economic resources. But we clearly see black women don't have economic resources, because their net worth is $5, and they don't build wealth because they are emotional and primarily consumers. And because they are consumers, they know nothing about production, they know nothing about building businesses. So you cannot build anything if you don't know how to build. And if you don't know how to build, you don't know how to get resources. And if you don't know how to get resources, you don't have resources. And if you don't have resources, you cannot do something like divest from a community of men that you say are not producing, because you're not a producer yourself. So again, I look at the whole divestment argument, and it's a complete and utter failure of an argument. It's not even something that should be debated, because when you look at this whole divestment argument, it falls completely apart when you understand business, you understand economics, and you understand culture. And if you understand those concepts, you understand that you cannot divest from a group of men if you go out of your way to raise and create those boys to become those type of men, because you don't understand yourself, and you don't want to understand yourself because you hate yourself. And this is a thing when it comes down to the Afro-American Negro female. She wants to sit there and talk about she wants to divest, and you cannot, again, divest something when you don't own anything in your community. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Ascension, The Devilish Negro reaches a turning point in the life of this powerful E-Steam series story. Get E-Steam Ascension at online booksellers today.